You may have heard that I started a new project. It's called A Year of Red. And for this project, I decided that I wanted to design a calendar based on illustrations and paintings from Red Riding Hood. The materials that I decided to use were watercolor, gouache, my dip pen, liners, etc. But in order to achieve the look that I was going for, I decided that I needed to practice and learn watercolor before I got started on my actual projects. So that's what this video is based on. I decided that it would be a good idea to practice my washes. So I decided to start with flat washes. And before I get too far into this video, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on the giveaway. The books that I had ordered that had came in, they were damaged, and I talked to customer service and they happily reprinted them for free. So as soon as I received those books, the prints had arrived probably 5 days ago. So as soon as I receive the second reprinting of the books, I will be mailing those out. I am waiting for my shipping supplies to get here, but they should be here Friday. So I'm hoping to have them in the mail by Monday. I'd like to have it done by Saturday, but with the kids being home, it's a little bit harder to concentrate on orders. So I'm planning on having them all in the mail on Monday. Okay. So back to this video. I could not figure out what I was doing wrong here. I picked an excellent watercolor sketchbook by Stillman & Byrne, and I've done a piece using these Winsor & Newton Cotman, this little palette that I have here in the video right now. I've done a little piece, the mermaid piece. I will have a picture pop up on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. And I think that came out well because I was doing a layering process. And right now I'm trying to learn washes, so I just couldn't figure out why they weren't coming out the way they were supposed to. Especially because I just got done with Inktober and I felt like my Inktober process would be very similar to my watercolor process because I had just gotten done doing a whole bunch of like ink washes. So you would think that I would be able to come into watercolor and be totally comfortable with it, but that was definitely not the case. So for a while, I just kept working and working, thinking that I was just out of practice. You know, it had been a while since I have painted physically. I mean, like my last video was digitally, so maybe I was just out of practice. Maybe it was something with the sketchbook, maybe the paper wasn't right. I wasn't officially sure what I was doing wrong at this point. But I did think that, you know, the more I would do, the better it would get, and I kept trying different colors just to see if it was a certain color that was giving me trouble. And no matter what I did, I just could not figure out why these washes were not coming out flat the way they were supposed to. So then I decided that maybe I needed to work wet into wet the way that I did with the mermaid. Like maybe that would help me out a little bit. And I wasn't sure if maybe it was the sketchbook itself, because it was kind of like, even though I had the binders down, it did seem like it was angled a certain way just because it was in a sketchbook. So I tried the wet into wet method and I was still completely frustrated with it. So being completely frustrated, I decided to pull out the Daniel Smith dot cards just to make sure that it wasn't the paints and it was something that I was doing. The Daniel Smith dot card samples were a lot more pigmented, which is what is expected. The Cotmans are student grade and the Daniel Smiths are artist grade. So the artist grade paints are going to be more pigmented, which is expected, you know, especially with the price difference. So those washes were still coming out funky and I just could not figure out what I was doing wrong. I couldn't figure it out. So at this point, I was completely frustrated and I decided to call it quits for the day. I needed to figure out what I wasn't doing right. I know there was something. I had watched a bunch of videos prior to this, but I was missing something and I could not figure out what it was. So naturally, I went over to Watercolor Misfit and decided to check out some of her beginner videos on flat washes. And it turns out she suggests ratio for one, the water to paint ratio. The second tip was tilt, as in tilting your board, and the third was bead. I got the first one and the last one. I was missing the tilt. My board was not tilted. I was working flat in a sketchbook, and that's why my washes were not coming out right. So I decided to take that advice the next day, tilt my board up, and then I decided to also switch my paper. So I decided to go ahead and grab my masking tape and my old 5x7 block of Fabriano Artistico extra white hot press 140 pound watercolor paper like I normally use, and I decided to try again. I also decided to really focus on mixing my paints properly, and I also decided to try the one thing of watercolor concentrated paint that I had, and I got this in one of my old sketch boxes, and I only used it once, and it's very pigmented concentrated watercolor. So I figured if anything, my nozzle was clogged for some reason, I don't know why, so I had to get a little syringe to get my paint out, which is fine. But I decided to switch up the paint that I was using as well. And I mixed 2 different consistencies with this paint, and then I decided to go and mix the red from the Winsor & Newton Cotman paint, just to make sure that it was the technique that I was using and not the paints. Because like I said before, the mermaid piece came out okay, so I can't imagine I couldn't really blame the paints. I knew it was something that I was doing. So I decided to go ahead and mix also the red from the Winsor & Newton Cotman paint. So I took all this knowledge and a brand new attitude and decided to tackle this again with amazing results. I could not believe the difference just what tilting my board did for me and making sure my paints were at the correct consistency actually did for the wash itself. It was so invigorating to finally have a breakthrough after being so frustrated for so long. I was also very, very impressed with the difference between the washes in the Cotman watercolor set as well. It's obviously not as pigmented as the concentrated one, as that is to be expected, but I was very happy knowing that I could work with the paints that I had, and I didn't have to go buy a whole bunch of new ones. Another tip that was very helpful is what I'm doing now from the Watercolor Misfit, and she recommends using a dry brush to soak up the excess liquid at the bottom so you don't get any extra pooling down there as well. And the next one that I'm working on now is the super concentrated wash, and I just thought that was gorgeous as well too. So I might actually want to invest in some of the concentrated colors. I do feel like I'm going to want to work with watercolor tubes instead of the pans, just because I feel like the mixing process, and I'm going to have more control over my color mixing with the tubes. So I do have a bunch of those on my Christmas list, so fingers crossed that I get some of those. So while I'm working on these washes, I have a question for you. Did you like this video? Did you like how I showed you what I was having trouble with and the process I went through to fix it? Or do you prefer straight up tutorials or an art project with like a chatty kind of video in the background? I think I'm going to kind of do away with the vlogs just because they don't seem to perform very well, which is fine. You know, I just was experimenting to see what you guys like. So leave a comment below and let me know what type of content you would like to see on this channel moving forward so I can best judge the situation. Because as I take this adventure on my new project, I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to print these calendars, the type of composition, and I'm going to have to learn anatomy and all those types of things. So I figured if I just took you along through this process with me, that it might be more beneficial and we can chat a little bit more and you can learn my process and see how I figure things out, what products I recommend, which ones I didn't like, that kind of thing. So I'd really love to know what you guys think. I want to enjoy the content that I make, and I want you guys to enjoy it too. So just giving me a little bit of feedback and letting me know what you like and what you don't like is really a big help, so we can continue on this art journey together and get to know one another. And I feel like during Inktober there's just such a nice community here, and I'm so happy and thankful for all of you. Speaking of being thankful, I wanted to say happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next one.